Sean and Janet have been veteran missionaries for over 40 years. They have mobilized more than 300,000 people. That's a lot. On short-term mission trips impacting more than 70 nations. And we heard about 2 of them tonight from Paul's testimony. They serve with 232 full-time missional staff in the San Diego, Baja region, 2 large outreach campuses in Baja, Mexico. They are, to me, though, that's important. That's great leadership. But they have a heart for reaching out to people. They have a heart. They are great leaders. They have a passion and a mission. And their number one goal, as they told me when I talked to them, is to influence their children and their grandchildren for our great goal of passing our faith on to the next generation. So I just want to turn it over to you. I'm so excited for what you have to say to us tonight. So Sean and Janet, it's all yours.
Well, thank you so much, Barb. It's great to be here. I always like to say I feel like the freshman at the senior prom. I'm just happy to be here. We have a large family. We have 3 daughters, 2 of them married, 6 grandkids. And so I think you'll get to see a little photo of Janet and I got married over 40 years ago. And since we got married, we were both full-time with YWAM. And we were in Los Angeles, YWAM, for about 12 years. And then God began to speak to us to move to the border region. And of course, nowadays, the borders are in the news almost daily. I don't think we realized back then how strategic it would be. And one of the trips, I took my 3.5 Andrea with me to build a home for an impoverished family. And during the build, she began to play with 2 little girls living next door in an old abandoned bus, and pulled me aside at the end of the build and asked me a question that really changed my life and changed our whole family's life and several 100,000 other people. She said, "Daddy, are you going to build a house for the bus people too?" So she's 3.5 years old. And in YWAM, we really believe God can use children. And so that question was really a question from God. And so we went back and made a commitment to do this, the next house. And that was many years ago. So now we built 7,600 homes in 27 different countries. And that's just our chapter. So there's a picture of the house. This is kind of the second day. So the houses are small, they're efficient. Somebody asked a question one day, what do we owe the poor? And the answer is adequacy or sufficiency. Jesus grew up in adequacy. He didn't grow up in great wealth, but he had a loving family, access to reading and education, and a place to live. So the essence of Homes of Hope is just to provide an adequate shelter. And on our journey, my wife and I, we've always believed that, and one of our values for our whole mission is that God uses the whole family. And so we never viewed just God calling my wife and I, but calling each other. And so I'm going to let Janet share a few stories with you about our kids and our grandkids and some of the philosophies that we've used. And one of the things I like to add before she shares is Acts 1:1. And Acts 1:1 is really interesting because you have Luke, the detailed gospel writer. He's starting Acts and he said, everything Jesus did and taught. And I think nowadays in church, sometimes we're excited when somebody will come to a Bible study or a church or a book study, which is wonderful. I'm excited too. But I think when we can get people to do and hear, or to hear and do, it's really, really important. And Jesus had a tremendous impact of influence, not just because of what he said. And that involves engaging our kids and our grandkids in actually doing the work of God. So I'm going to challenge you at the end to consider a possible Home of Hope trip with maybe your grandkids, but I'll leave that till the end, and I'll turn it over to my wife, Janet, who's going to share a little bit about our story with our grandkids and our kids.
Yeah, it's really, really an honor to share with all of you tonight. And my prayer is that we can all be encouraged for the purposes of God on how we influence and we're a blessing to our family. My story goes back. I started kind of learning how to be a good grandparent by learning how to be a good parent. And I remember one day I was in church singing with the worship team. We were singing the hymn, my favorite hymn, Great is Thy Faithfulness. And our youngest daughter is Tiffany Hope. And if you know the hymn, which I'm sure you do, there's a line in there that says, strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow. And Tiffany was my most creative child. She cut her bangs when she was 3, like really short, and said, I wanted to look like you, mommy. And one day I found her throwing rocks at cars driving by. She put things in the VCR and ruined it. They were all things I never thought to tell her not to do. She just had a very creative mind. She wasn't a naughty child. She was just very adventuresome. And I remember I would say to people, oh, wow, Tiffany's going to be a real challenge when she's a teenager. And while we're singing this song on the worship team, I looked at those words, strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow. And whether or not you believe that God speaks to us in, audibly or whatever, it wasn't an audible voice, but this sweet impression in my heart was so strong. And God told me, don't say Tiffany's going to be a troubling teenager. Say that she is bright hope for her generation, because that's who I've called her to be. And I went to Tiffany right after church. She was about 9 years old. And I said, Tiffany, God told me that you are bright hope for your generation. And she said, well, I guess I'm going to be a missionary then. And right now, Tiffany's leading a discipleship training school. She's been asked to speak in different places and share her faith with her generation. She's traveling to Cambodia, making a commitment to serve at Youth of the Mission in Norway. Tiffany has a real voice for her generation, and that what I really learned, parents, that we speak God's prophetic words and destiny over our children and grandchildren. We had a friend many years ago on YWAM-LA, and his boys were a little bit rowdy, and you never heard him saying that. He'd say, oh, Paul is such an evangelist. We're like, really? Or are we talking about the same Paul? But what our friend was doing was seeing who God had purposed his children to be and calling out their destinies. So that became very important to Sean and I. And God also showed us that the children he entrusted us with, our 3 daughters, were our most important disciples, that as we raised them, they could influence others. So because we'd been learning these lessons, carried over to my kids were getting grown up. We were out to dinner one night with some dear friends. He was the head of a huge international Christian relief organization, World Vision. And he liked to have a table question every night. So his question was, where do you see yourself in 5 years? What do you want to be doing? And I said, well, I want to be a really good grandma. And he was like, what? Why would you want to be a really good grandma? He was really taken back by it. And I started thinking about that, and I realized that so much of who I am and who God made me to be came through my own grandparents. So I was born into poverty, and youngest of 6 children. Often my mom didn't know how she was going to feed us. She would get so stressed out about that she actually had what they called in that day a nervous breakdown when I was very small. My grandparents lived in a different state, but they drove down 1,000 or more miles, picked us up, me and my other young sister, took us home, and we spent the summer there. And then it became a bit of a routine that they'd take us for the summer. And almost all the stability in my life and many of my really my best childhood memories come from those visits to my grandparents. They were pastors of a small church. We were with them at the church. We'd hang out in the basement. We'd go with them to the people who attended their church, their home on Sunday afternoon for chicken. And it was just a really wonderful legacy, and they invested in us so much. And I remember that when my first call to missions came, and then I was going to my discipleship training school and made the commitment to be a missionary. They're the first people that wrote me, and they said, Janet, we're going to support you as a missionary. And they lived on very meager, they were retired, very meager amount of Social Security, and they started sending me $5 every month. They'd write me a letter every month and send $5. By the time that they both passed away, it was up to 15, but it was just such a blessing in my life. And what they were saying to me was, we believe in you, Janet. We believe in God's gift and call in your life. And that's such a powerful thing that we can give to our children and our grandkids, is to say that I believe in what God has for you. I really believe that a lot of our missionary career and all that is from the faithful prayers of my grandparents and the fact that they invested in us. And I asked my grandkids the other day, I'm so blessed because 3 of them live a couple blocks from us, and the other 3 live just outside the door of the campus that I work at every day in Tijuana. So I'm with them all the time. They're in our home all the time. We have great access. And so I was trying to say, what makes a good Gigi and a good Papa? And really all they could come up with is they know they're loved by us. And I think we all have that to give. And I think for some of you don't have that luxury of being right there with your grandchildren. But what I want to share with you, my grandparents didn't have the internet. They didn't have Zoom calls. You know, they didn't have the means to get on a plane and fly down and connect with us, but they found that way. They found those summers where they just let us be kids and run in their yard and play, and they just loved us unconditionally. They took that time every month to write the letter and send the $5, $10, or $15, which was a great impact on my life. So all of us now, we've got Zoom. We can really influence people. The one thing, I hated COVID, I hated lockdowns. I'm a total people person. But we did learn through that time that we all have that ability, as we're doing tonight, to communicate to people far and wide through Zoom. So please don't underestimate what you can give to your grandchildren, whether they're far or near. The love that you have in your heart for them, that unconditional love expressed, is life-giving and life-transforming. So I just pray that you're encouraged that whatever you have, you'll reach out with. For us, it's been a missional journey. So the other night, my daughter asked me, can you take care of Aviana? She's our 10-year-old granddaughter. The boys had baseball and other things. I said, well, I'm committed to speak out in one of our, in Mexico, the little poor neighborhoods are called colonias. I was committed to teach some people that were teach Bible to people living in homes of hope out in the community. I go, well, she's welcome to come with me. And so Aviana was so excited. She goes, I've always wanted to do that, Gigi. And she came and she worked in the little children's class while I taught. So whatever we're doing, we can pass on to them. I know in the olden days, people were farmers, their grandkids would go farm with them or whatever, but I think whatever you have in your life, that's what you give to your grandkids. And just that love that you have is transformational to them.
Yeah, and one of the challenges I'd like to have you consider is, Barb mentioned we mobilized 300,000 people, and it's truly remarkable. And the way we did it was, instead of just doing a home of hope ourselves, we created an opportunity, a platform, if you will, for people to come and join us. And so we started out with high school kids. So we had probably the first 400 houses were all built by high school kids. And then one day we realized that my friend wanted to bring his wife and his kids, and And so we started doing family trips, and now we've got military vets with PTSD building with Homes of Hope, and we've got all these incredible things happening. So we'll host about 7,000 people this year alone in Homes of Hope trips. And what I could envision, what I think would be outstanding, is to have you maybe consider, it takes about 18 to 20 people to build a house. So you could combine with a couple other parents, or just bring your kids and your grandkids and do a family trip. I know when my parents were 50-year anniversary, I come from a big family of 8 kids, and we all were going to throw our parents a big party for their 50th wedding anniversary. And my mom said, I don't want a party. I want to go to Mexico with all my kids and my grandkids and build a home of hope. And so we had quite a large group to do one house, but we had about 27 of us. And we spent a couple of days building for a family with a bunch of kids. And I'm telling you, it was the best family experience we've ever had as the Lambert family. And so I'd like to have you consider maybe bringing a group, or perhaps if you email info at the legacy group, or whatever the info name is there, Barb will get that at the end. Maybe if there's enough people, we could pick a date and a bunch of you could come together, even if you don't know each other, and we'll put together some teams of people. Now, it does cost money. Each home costs about $9,000 with the furniture package that we put together. And then there's a per person fee, but we house you, we feed you, we pick you up at the airport, we take you there. But I tell you why I'm spending a lot of time here. We're so full. I mean, I want you to come, but I'm really not trying to sell you too much on Homes of Hope. What I'm really trying to sell you on is everything Jesus did and taught. And if we can get to do something with our grandkids, where you're painting together and swinging that together, a shared memory. And I always love the 3 rules of the early church. In Acts 15, they had the big Jerusalem council, and they said, abstain from meat and blood offered up to idols and sexual immorality. And then as they were sending Paul out, they said, oh, and don't forget the poor, to which Paul replied, that was the very thing he was eager to do. So I think that modeling of having an opportunity to build, and I know some of you are probably various ages, but we've had people in their 80s come and participate with Homes of Hope. We've got little strips of wood that need to be painted, and you can kind of sit in a lawn chair and do that painting, and we can make it work. And probably go down to about 6 or 7 years old as far as a younger person could do that. But again, I think the principle that I know this ministry is built on, and I so appreciate Larry, the founder, and all those that are in leadership, is this idea of a multi-generational God. So when we celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary a few years ago, I was really struck with the scripture about the covenants, how God makes covenant with people. And when you look at Deuteronomy and so many other books, and I know this probably gets repeated every week, but it's worth repeating, that we're to teach our children and our children's children. And God's response back as we walk in his ways and we follow his principles is that his blessing will come upon our children and our children's children. And so at our 40th wedding anniversary, I rented a big house and we got everybody together, all the kids and the grandkids. And I wrote a covenant celebrating our 40th wedding anniversary. And I said, and I invited God, would you not only, we've been blessed, Janet and I have been so blessed, and we see that the blessing of God is on our children and our grandchildren, but we want more than that. We want a multi-generational ministry expression. And again, I so appreciate the theme of this gathering tonight, because I do think the role of influence, when you're a parent with a 7-year-old, you have influence and authority, but as we get to be grandparents, you kind of end up just with influence. But I can guarantee you, influence is the greatest kind of authority that we can have over someone's life. And if they hear us say something and then they see that our life aligns and that we're doing it. So it's everything Jesus did and taught. And I love James 1:22. it says, do not just be a hearer of the word and so deceive yourself, but do what it says. So this idea that Nike has, just do it. They owe the Bible a whole bunch of royalties because it's right there in James 1:22. Just do it. And so I just want to encourage you, and it may be our center here. You got to fly into San Diego. We cross the border, and we have two centers, one in Ensenada, one in Tijuana. That might be too far, might be too complex for you. But I'd encourage you to look for an opportunity, maybe to go serve locally in your community. Just go somewhere and take your grandkids and go serve someone and let them see you showing compassion to the poor. Let's have that response that Paul had. Don't forget the poor. And I think that modeling, not only to our kids, but to our grandkids, will have a tremendous impact on the legacy that we leave, because we all know that things are caught more than they're taught. And so words are important. Getting our kids to church are important. Sending them a book is important. But I think if they can see us as grandparents modeling something, it's really tremendous. We just finished doing 100 homes of hope in Ukraine. And Aviana, who Janet already mentioned, she's 10 years old. Her and another kid mobilized and raised hundreds of dollars for Ukraine because she was really moved by it. And so it's just great to see our grandkids have hearts. And I think when you have a soft heart and you're moving towards the things of God, it's really tremendous. I think we've got just a couple more minutes. Janet, did you have another story?
Well, this is actually a story about parenting. Sean's mentioning a lot about letting our grandkids see us in action, see who we really are. I think we often don't realize how smart our children and grandchildren are. I remember one time our daughter was about 12 years old. She'd been with Sean and a bunch of youth leading a youth trip down in Hermosillo, Mexico. It was super hot and miserable. And she did great. She was like a total trooper. And the day she gets home and sees me, she starts crying about everything. Because mom's there, so you can let down. So we were hosting friends who ran a large children's ministry and showing them around. And finally I pulled her aside. I said, Rachel, please stop. You're being so naughty. She said, you just want me to be good so those people will think you're good parents. And I'm like, you're so right, honey. I had to stand right there on that hill in Tijuana and apologize to her. And because we have to be real with them, we have to be real with our grandkids. And I think if we can cultivate that relationship where they can say, call us out when we're not being real, but also that they see who we really are, then we make a powerful impact on their life, because it goes to that same thing Sean's talking about, be not just hearers of the word, but doers also. So I think we can learn a lot from our children and our grandchildren. I take every opportunity I can get. My daughters ask me a lot, Mom, can you take the kids here? Can you keep them? Can you go to, baseball with them? I use those moments in the car. I'm telling them about Jesus. I'm telling them about drugs, staying away. I just take every available moment I can to influence that next generation. And I consider it one of the greatest privileges of my life.
So in summary, you think of some of the core things we're trying to say is that it's not only just what we say, but it's what we do. And also it's having God's perspective. When Janet was telling the story of Tiffany, Bright Hope for her generation, and our friends who literally would lay in front of the door of his kids who were virtually gang members almost, or borderline gang members. And he would only speak out what he saw their destiny to be. All three of them are incredible full-time missionaries in different parts of the world. Just an amazing story. But let's speak out. If you see your grandkid wobbling, keep speaking out who they are in Christ, and God has a destiny for them. And then look for an opportunity to James 1:22 at Acts 1:1 it, where you can actually do something and model a missional type experience with your grandkid and kids. And I think that will light them up. And so we're here to host you. Even if you can't afford to build a house, We do have other outreaches. We got orphanages and all kinds of other things that you can participate in. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Barb, but we thank you guys for being with us. We really believe that God's heart is to move in a multi-generational way. We saw it with our kids. We always looked at our kids and said, they're not extra baggage. They're a part of this call. And we've seen it all over YWAM, where those that would include their kids in the destiny and the call of God, the results were just amazing. And then, of course, our grandkids. We really believe our grandkids are a part of this. And if you'd like to get a copy of the book, you can go to ywampublishing.com. And I think they're $8. Are also available at Amazon, a Kindle version. And love for you to enjoy our story. And I'm sure they can get you other information as well through this site. But thank you guys so much. And let's believe God for a move of God over multiple generations. And I believe as I get older, I see my influence vouchers get bigger and bigger, but sometimes I don't cash them. So I want to encourage all of you who are grandparents, and most of that's probably who's on this Zoom, is that you have influence vouchers. Don't forget to cash them. Sometimes you can have something in your wallet. It's a food coupon or a gift card and you don't go and use it. So use that influence voucher, get involved and do something missional with your grandkids. And I think you'll see an exponential return on that effort. Thank you guys for taking the time to listen to our story.
Thank you for sharing. It was really inspirational. And just to think about the 300,000 people that have gone on short-term missions. And as we heard earlier from Paul Golden, how lives can be changed, right? Lives can be changed. They can get out there and help someone in need, work with other people, all different kinds of groups you mentioned, church groups, business groups. What are a few of the other? I'm going to come back to you with some questions, but just as we close this, what are a few other kinds of groups that you meet who come and build a house?
Yeah, sports team schools. One of my favorite groups is military vets with PTSD. There's Aaron Kilionis has a ministry with bringing vets that have PTSD. And what he found is they find healing through. So maybe you have a grandkid a little disheveled. What Jesus said and Paul wrote in Acts, it's more blessed to give than to receive. What happens is these military guys come down and instead of blowing something up, they're actually building something and rebuilding someone else's life. And in the process, their own life is rebuilt. So I love the military vets. My son-in-law has a program called Hope Sports, engaging athletes to bring hope to the world. And he's seen over 400 Olympic athletes come through and build houses with us. We've had over 1,000 CEOs and presidents of companies. We've had Steve Reineman from Pepsi. He's retired now. Penny Pritzker, who was former Secretary of Commerce. Her family owns the Hyatt. She came and built. I could go on and on. Just so many great business leaders, Patrick Lencioni and Ken Blanchard and so many others. So we've just seen amazing people bring their company, their employees, their small group, their churches, birthday parties, family events. And there's just something powerful about combining, getting a group of about 20 and actually doing something. Going to church is great and I love it. And being a hearer is an important first step, but being doers, if we can kind of combine the hearing and the doing, I think that's where the life change takes place.
Well, Sean and Janet, we'd like you to hang around and we want to invite our grandparents to ask them some questions. Well, I've got a couple questions that I'd like for you, and then the rest of you, we have a few more minutes if you'd like to. But you talked a little bit about how God led you to YWAM. And so both of you kind of at the same time, can you just tell us a little bit about that story? I thought that was awesome.
Froze.
Sorry, I don't know if that's your computer or ours, Barb, but you froze. It might have been
How God led us.
Just repeat the question, sorry.
Yes, okay. Yeah, so you both, and of course, you had some great stories in your book. It was just wonderful. A lot of personal stories, stories about how you met, but you both ended up at YWAM at the same time, and that's how you met. Tell us a little bit more about that story.
Well, I was raised in a Pentecostal home and went to youth camp when I was 10 years old. And was a lady there with a puppet, Miss Mary Lou, said, if you're willing to do whatever God wants with your life, come up to the altar. And I went down to the altar at Old Youth Ranch. And when I stood up at the end of quite a lengthy prayer time for a 10-year-old, I just had that awareness that missions was in my future. That was my calling.
I grew up in a large Catholic family, and then came to faith in a Lutheran church that had a great summer camp, and I became a camp counselor, and I realized I wanted to engage a broken world with God's generosity. And so I had this heart to make a difference. And I was in university, and a good friend of mine who's now Dr. Todd Johnson, who works at Gordon Conwell University, told me that 2.5 billion people in the world had never heard the name of Jesus one time. And I found myself quitting school, selling everything I had, and joining YWAM in 1979. And we met shortly after that. And I ended up in Thailand Christmas Day, working with refugees that were fleeing Cambodia into Thailand. And God spoke to me about the two hands of the gospel. One hand, you deal with the physical need, and the other hand, you do the spiritual need. Highlighted by 12 Cambodian soldiers who came to Christ one day. My partner and I were preaching the gospel and doing follow-up Bible studies, and we talked about forgiveness. And every one of these men had raped and murdered people, and to see the weeping and the receiving of forgiveness, if you will, in these men. And I realized then all the humanitarian aid in the world cannot fix a broken heart. And so it's just moments like those that we just kept going. And we got married a couple of years after we met. And we've been on an incredible journey and seeing God move in so many wonderful ways.
Well, one of the things in the book too that you mentioned is, we look at your ministry and God has really blessed it in a tremendous way, but it hasn't always been easy. And there was one story in there that you told about, you just thought like, I think we need to quit.
Yeah.
And you said something to Janet. And so what did you say, Janet? And what happened after that?
Well, we had come through a very discouraging time, and we were a few years into pioneering. And so with all this stuff happened, and we were in debt as a ministry, and we offered to the few staff we had to leave, or release you from your commitments. And they all said, okay, we're out of here. See you later. I think a couple people stayed, and our children had no option but to stay with us. But as we were processing what to do next, Sean's like, well, he's the visionary. So you always do what I want to do. What do you want to do? And my answer was what I hope will always be and has always been. I want to be in the will of God, because Romans 12:2 says that's the place that's good and acceptable and perfect. And so Sean started crying, goes, I want to be in the will of God too. So we're like, yeah, we're not quitting. We knew that some of the stuff we'd started had life and could be developed by others, but the Homes of Hope was just starting. It was like a baby. It would be like abandoning a child when they're not ready to be on their own. So we stuck it out, and we're really grateful. God's way is the best. And we there have been challenges, and there's lots of challenges all the time, every day, but we love following Jesus.
I think perseverance is a very underrated leadership quality. And when my financial administrator told me he was doing cocaine in a hotel room and a bunch of other stuff, as Janet described, happened, I was ready to quit. And when she said, I just want to be in the will of God, it was like rebar came into my soul. And I realized, I want to be in the will of God too. And I just started crying, and I couldn't stop. And then we just, again, not an audible voice, but the most used phrase in scripture 2,500 times is God said or God spoke. And so I've never heard the audible voice of God, but you're in this moment and this thought comes over you, do not quit. Homes of Hope. I'm not finished with Homes of Hope yet. And we had only just got started for, just a handful of houses. So I think now if we would have quit, so don't quit. Even when you struggle with your grandkids, don't quit. Because perseverance is a very, very important leadership quality.
That's awesome. And there's many more stories like that in some of the places you had to live for a brief time. And but just the steel, the rebar in your soul. And even though it certainly makes sense sometimes to think, oh, this is too much, but wow, look where God has brought you. Yeah. Oh, well, here's a couple of questions. How do you accommodate entire families?
Well, we built our own facility. If you've got anything in missions, you go around the world, sometimes mission centers are not known for being all that nice. And we went the other way. And everything we built is debt-free by different businessmen and donors. And so we have these beautiful hotel style rooms with 2 queens and beautiful bathrooms and outdoor plazas, and it's just an amazing center. And we did it all because we wanted either individuals or families. So typically a family of 5 or 6 would have their own hotel room. And sometimes we have pull-out couches and bunk beds in the room too, but 2 queens. And so we just have a lot of family housing. And we also have some dorm housing, which is also very nice. And some of the families stay in there because it's a little bit cheaper. But we have our own facilities. We have our own transportation. We got our own tool trucks. And we have 230 staff that know the communities that we serve. And so as you bring a group, we'll put you in nice housing and host you and pick you up at the airport and feed you. And we got the taco guy usually one night and the churro guy, and people go crazy, and we have great food and great fun. And my wife and I often say we think our calling is to have love your neighbor parties, because when you go to a party, it's really fun and you want to do it again. So we've tried to make serving the Lord a joy and fun, and really have nice facilities and great customer service to just serve those that come and build. So.
Yeah, great. So a couple things. One is Connie was wondering like an approximate cost.
Yeah, usually the per person fee is around what, 475.
You're thinking of the deluxe.
Yeah, well, we have different levels. We found out some people want to do the deluxe, some people want to get the middle, and we have a standard. So it's usually a per person fee of around 400, 450, and that includes everything: food, housing, transportation, sheets, pillows, blankets. And then the house itself costs, I think, 8,600 plus the furniture, so roughly a little shy of 10,000 for the house and furniture package. And so typically what some people do is they'll do some fundraisers, or if you have a little capacity, kind of pay for the house. And sometimes the kids or grandkids can chip in for that too, or do a little fundraiser. But everybody has a different economic angle. A lot of the churches will pay for the house, and then the members will pay for their own per person fee. So it does get pricey, but again, we had 7,000 people that we hosted. So I think once you see what we offer and all the complexity, it's really an amazing short-term mission trip.
And so you work with each organization or someone in your staff works with the organizations and the right way to set it up for them?
Yep. We have a full-time group registrar. And again, sometimes one person in the group will pay for the whole thing. And other times people will do fundraisers or send out. We have a little kind of GoFundMe mechanism where you can get donations from around the country and raise the money. Or you get your grandkids involved in raising money to help build a house, and that adds a lot of meaning because they had to work for it in a way to get those funds. So yeah, we have all that in our website, and also we have several full-time people that do group registration that can answer all those questions.
Sure. Okay. 2 more questions. One, the ages. I think you mentioned very young to very old. What's your youngest ever and your oldest ever?
Well, I don't recommend this, but we had a guy there that came a couple of weeks ago. It's his 25th trip in a row since he was a small child. He's come every year except the 1 year in COVID, and he made up for that with an extra trip the year we opened up. And he is recently married and brought a few-month-old baby along with him. But
Not
of course, the
recommended.
baby was strapped on the mama, and she sat off to the side. But normally we say around 7 or 8, but our daughter started building with us when she was 3, the one daughter, and they
If
just
the
pound nails in the dirt and do
the
things
younger
like
the
that.
child, then you have to have somebody to help kind of make sure they're okay. But
Yeah.
typically, if you had a 6 or 7 year old, they there's enough for them to do surprisingly in painting usually. And then as we get older, my mom was in her 80s when she built a home, and we had a lawn chair out there for her, so she wanted to hang out and rest a little bit, or she could get up and do a little bit of work. And again, the groups can go from a small of 15 up to about 25, 30 if you've got a mix of kids and adults. And so it's just a great family thing, and the family works with you, and the community's out there, and you're building this cool little house. It's just the greatest thing. So it's so much fun.
Yeah. And I'm sure not everyone who comes down is a real solid Christian and practicing, and you have some opportunities to share that. And how does that part of it work?
Oh,
Somebody's
well, that's
asking.
probably the coolest thing about Homes of Hope. God
Yeah.
spoke to us that anyone, literally anyone who feels called to serve the poor should be welcome in Homes of Hope. So not to be on our staff, that's a different criteria, but to be a part of Homes of Hope is literally open to anyone. And I could list off a whole bunch of interesting people that have come and built. And I tell you what, there's that common ground around the poor. And so you can be a believer, you can not be a believer, you can be whatever, but you have to have a heart to serve the poor. And so what we do is we have a prayer time at the beginning and the end of the job. And then if the group wants it, like if it was actually a full-on Legacy Coalition event, you might want to bring your own speakers or have your own content in the mornings or evenings. But if you're not, if you just as a family, we have lots of staff that can help bring extra content, or you can just build a house. So each group can kind of dial up or dial back the process of what they want to get out of the experience.
And because some of the people that come are not believers, we've had the privilege of being involved with people coming to know the Lord on a weekend team. So it's an interesting dynamic of them coming to us, and our staff just love them and serve them. And sometimes the families are believers that we're building for, and then they're sharing the Lord with the team members that come.
I think, Barb,
we've seen God really touch people on both sides of the equation.
An important quick principle is often we think of if somebody becomes a believer, they're going to be filled with God's love, and then they'll be missional or serve and love their neighbor. And what I found also true is if you teach somebody how to love their neighbor, even if they don't know the Lord, it sparks. It's like the clock can go clockwise and counterclockwise, if you will. So we've just seen tremendous fruitfulness in just giving people the opportunity to love their neighbor, and it creates a spark and a whole series of questions about how they can know God. So it can go either direction.
So one last question, then I'll turn it over to Larry. But what about if there's just a small group? What about if you only have 6 to 8? Do you combine groups together?
It's more challenging, but we have done that in the past. Yes, we sometimes can work on that.
We have a group coming this week that's a family of about 6 or 7, and we just put extra staff out there with them. We can't do it too often.
It's a little harder, but yes, we will for the Legacy Coalition. We will do it.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Sean and Janet. What a blessing you are.